So I was a member of the legislature here in British Columbia for almost 12 years, and including in 2019 when the DRIPA legislation was brought forward. You know, if you fix DRIPA, restore DRIPA to its original intent, so it's more of a guiding set of principles and so forth. It's not about, a veto or, consent being mandatory. It's certainly about engagement, consultation, partnership, equity, all that stuff.
Welcome back to the Markets and Leader podcast. I am your awesome host, Lyndsay Malchuk. If you watched my recent market knowledge episode, you'll know that I unpacked what DRIPA is, why it was introduced, and why it has become one of the most controversial issues in resource development today. I also promise we continue that conversation right here. Joining me today is returning guest, awesome Todd Stone, president of the Association for Mineral Exploration, or AME. Now, Todd brings a very unique perspective to this discussion, having spent years in public service and now working closely with BC's mineral exploration industry as it navigates one of the biggest policy shifts in this province that they've done in decades. Today, we're moving beyond the headlines and beyond the political talking points. Todd, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here in person.
Amazing podcast host. That's your title.
Sometimes I got to do a shameless plug. I got to do it, right?
All right, I'm an amazing guest.
You are an amazing guest.
Okay.
Shameless plugs throughout the whole thing.
That was really self-serving. Shameless.
How do you feel?
Yeah, I feel good.
It feels good?
Yeah, it's a busy time. There's lots going on.
Summer in this industry, in mining, we'll say, is supposed to be sort of the slowdown of things, but the last couple of years at least, oh no. Oh.
Well, it's really the ramp up for mineral exploration. Like our members, the prospectors, the junior mining companies, even the majors, like they're really starting in typically April, May, right through to October. I mean, this is when they make all their hay, right? It's their exploration programs are in full swing in every corner of the province.
Yeah,
hundreds and hundreds of projects. Like we are seeing a very significant increase in the number of projects, the total dollar value being invested in mineral exploration, and the obviously excitement and the sense of momentum in the sector. So it's all there's a good vibe out there right now. Generally speaking.
Yeah, you just came from the Golden Triangle recently.
Yeah.
What's the high level boots on the ground info you can bring back to us civilians?
Well, I mean, the Golden Triangle, roughly speaking, accounts for, I think it's close to 50, maybe even 55% of the active highest potential mineral exploration projects that are underway across the province. So there's a huge amount of activity up there, and we were fortunate to actually visit a range of projects from, very, very small, early exploration to, KSM's or the Seabridge KSM project, which is massive. I mean, you look at that project on paper, and it you get kind of a feel for how big it is, the scope and scale of it. But boy, when you're actually there and they have to fly you, and it's 20 minutes, helicopter from this particular target zone to another target zone, and then another half hour that way, or 20 minutes back the other.
Wild.
So there's a lot going on. And that was a special opportunity for me because I actually worked on that project.
I was going to say, you were there. You went back. Tell us what's changed. Nothing.
The kitchen is still the same, and the sleeping quarters is still the same, and the Kerr sulfurettes core is still in the box. The core box is in the exact same location where I remember helping stack them 30 plus years ago. So that was really crazy. But we were only a team of 8 back then. And I was there for 2 or 3 months over a couple summers, often wondering if the helicopter was coming back to pick us up ever, because you're just there for a long time.
Do you remember me?
Do you remember? Don't forget us. But this time, it was just a buzz with activity, like the 5 or 6 helicopters, flying all around us while we were trying to, do a little video and take some pictures and stuff. Just because that project, it's in a stage right now where it should be a producing mine in 5 to 7 years, and when it does go ahead, and not if, when it goes ahead, that one project alone will increase the total export volume of copper from Canada by 25%.
25%.
Yeah, 25%. Like that's the scale of the KSM project. Now, of course, in the area you have Galore Creek, and you have the Skena's Eske project. You've got Red Chris. You've got all these others, right? So there's a lot going on up there.
My gosh.
And it's not just those big projects. There's a lot of smaller, less advanced projects too that represent the big projects of the future.
It's so great to see that momentum. Now, I know that in our last conversation, you did mention that you took a picture way back then. Did you retake it this time?
I did. Yeah. So I was able to stand
gosh.
in the same spot, and I'm holding up the picture. The difference is that the picture has the glacier like pretty much right behind me.
There.
But the glacier is now receding. This is the Sulfurettes Glacier, is receding at about 40 meters per year. So, do the math, 30 years. The glacier is, kind of way up the mountainside and around the corner now. But
Wow.
but the same, just to go back to the same spot, I mean, to get to go there once in a lifetime is pretty special.
Right.
People pay a lot of money to do that kind of
Yeah.
ecotourism stuff. But to be able to go back a second time to the same spot and actually talk with and meet the people that are actively engaged in exploration up
So
there
well said.
today that are working so hard to bring that project online
Yeah.
as a producing mine, that was just really special. Like it was a really,
Absolutely.
really awesome
Can we get a copy
moment.
of that picture? Potentially?
Yeah.
Really love to copy this picture.
Absolutely, yeah. I didn't have the beard, and I wasn't smoking a Colt in the new picture like the old picture.
Well, some things have to evolve.
You have to trust me that the guy in the really geeky glasses and the beard and the Colt, that's actually me.
Trust the process.
Yeah.
There we go.
I was fully immersed. Yeah, that was after like 2 to 3 months of exploration. So
Oh my gosh.
right, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so today actually we're not going to talk about your trip. We are actually talking about something that is very controversial in our province, our industry right now. We're going to talk about DRIPA.
Yes.
So we're going to start right from the beginning. What was DRIPA actually created to do?
Well, so before we get fully into DRIPA, I would just want to say this.
Step back.
Just step back. Everyone in the mineral exploration industry, the broader mining sector, like there's always the odd exception, but generally speaking, people that have been engaged in looking for the minerals for the mines of the future, and people that are involved in building the mines and processing and whatnot, there have been good relationships with First Nations, for decades, generations, frankly.
Yeah.
Now, has the nature of the relationship and the engagement and the consultation and the participation and whatnot evolved and changed? Is it different today than it was, 30, 40 years ago? Yeah, of course it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's just really, really important to just say that at the front end, that
That's great.
certainly our members, and I know like most companies in exploration and in mining, understand that it's actually a significant opportunity. It's a significant leverage, a positive leverage point to actually have a great relationship with your local First Nation, have them involved early and often in the project. And in today's day and age, it's more about, full participation as equity partners, as, co-managing the projects, those types of things. So I just wanted to start there. But DRIPA, when it was brought in,
Hold up. One more quick thing, though.
sure.
One more thing. You were part of this DRIPA organization at the beginning, were you not?
Well,
You have a background in office.
yeah. So I was a member of the legislature here in British Columbia for almost 12 years, and including in 2019 when the DRIPA legislation was brought forward and debated for weeks and weeks and weeks in the legislature, and so I do have that unique perspective of being someone that was there, in the debate, while the debate was taking place, in the middle of it. I was there, to hear firsthand the undertakings of Premier John Horgan. Bless his soul. He was a good man. I was there to take in the testaments from the First Nations leaders that participated, and I was one of the MLAs that unanimously across all party lines voted in favor of the DRIPA legislation at the end of the day. So I think that offers a unique perspective in terms of kind of what it was positioned as at the time and what it has become today, and why there are some challenges and some concerns about kind of how it's evolved.
Okay.
At the time when it was brought forward, it was very much billed as a significant opportunity to recast reconciliation, but in an aspirational way, not as this legislation in and of itself would trump the laws and the regulations of the province of British Columbia.
Right.
It was very clearly stated by government that, in the answering of questions that was posed to government by the opposition, I was in the opposition, that this legislation was not intended to provide consent. It was not intended to be a veto, to provide a de facto veto over projects. It was not intended to require consent-based decision-making being driven deep into the regulatory processes of, let's say, mineral exploration,
Right.
for example. But rather, it was aspirational. It was a set of values that would guide industry, government, and First Nations as we walk hand in hand, arm in arm together down the path of reconciliation. And you don't have to take my word for it. Like, this is the debates of the legislature of British Columbia are in Hansard. Like, it's all written down. And I've actually gone back and reread all the debates just to again refresh my memory. And the way I remembered it is the way it actually happened. So where have we come to this point today? There's again, as I mentioned, the fact that it has been it hasn't really been very well implemented. Hasn't been effectively implemented by the province. I'm not pointing my finger at First Nations, and we can talk about some of the concerns that First Nations have expressed too. But from the perspective of industry, part of the promise that was made to industry, as industry also supported this legislation, that when it was introduced, it wasn't just the elected politicians. Every business association, every industry association, came out fully in support of the DRIPA legislation at the time. Again, that was on the basis of this being symbolic and aspirational, and we were promised that this would not be driven deep into regulatory processes. So I'll give you an example of that, where it's kind of complicating things. Like in mineral exploration, when you need a notice of work permit to do something that has some level of disruption to the land. So maybe you need to clear an area of 20 trees because that's where you're going to land a helicopter, or you're putting in a drill pad on the side of a mountain, and you need a specific permit because there's water down here and there's steep slopes up there, and you have to remove some trees and all the rest of it. Those types of permits were never intended to require approval or consent of First Nations. And furthermore, the premier is actually, don't have to take my word for it either. It's like the premier has said this repeatedly, even though he backed away from amendments to DRIPA, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. But the statutory decision makers, like there's thousands of men and women that work for the Ministry of Mining, the Ministry of Forests, the Ministry of Water, Land, and Air Protection. The different ministries that require permits for different activities on the land base. All of those statutory decision makers are, frankly, have been flying blind because there just hasn't been the clarity and the implementation support from the government, from the premier's office, the government, to assist people in understanding how DRIPA is supposed to be interpreted in practical terms.
Right.
Like that's ultimately where things are falling apart. And so what has it resulted in? It's resulted in very, very long permitting timelines for those notice of work permits. There's a new claim staking system called the Mineral Claims Consultation Framework, MCCF. That's the result of a different piece, the Gitxaala decision, but also is now full circle because DRIPA is woven into the Gitxaala decision. It will have, it's going to the Supreme Court has announced that they're going to hear the Gitxaala decision soon. And because DRIPA is incorporated into the appeals court's decision, the BC Appeals Court, with the Supreme Court now weighing in, it could have national implications. So we can talk about that. But all of this is getting conflated too, by the way. Like you have the Cowichan decision, and their private property was suddenly, potentially put on the table. You've got the Gitxaala decision around, which is about mineral tenure and the need for engagement and consultation, not consent and approval, but engagement and consultation, which don't have any issue with that whatsoever. And then you have DRIPA kind of sitting on top of all of this stuff, right? One final factor is you have a provincial government that I sincerely believe that the premier and his cabinet members have been trying to do the right thing. Like I start from that place. Like I served with a lot of these people. I served with the premier. We were on opposite side. We fought hard, in the chamber. Right. But I respect him and I respect his intentions. I think are sound when it comes to trying to do the right thing here. But he doesn't have the votes. Like he has a 1-seat majority government. When you take out the speaker, who is a New Democrat, it's a tie vote, and the speaker has to cast a tie. So if you have a sick member or someone that's not there, so the premier's ability to be, to pivot in some manner to try and bring the certainty required around the whole DRIPA discussion is pretty limited, because he has a group of caucus members that don't want any changes to DRIPA and how it's been implemented. He even has cabinet members that feel that way, and this is kind of an odd reality, because in our system of government, cabinet members are supposed to support
no matter what.
No matter what, are supposed to support the premier. When the government makes a direction on something, you can vote against it if you want. If you're in cabinet, it means you resign from cabinet. That's just the way the system's supposed to work, right? So it's all of those factors just mean that there's a lot of or a lack of clarity and growing uncertainty. And even though I can wrap my head around most of it most of the time, and I'm someone that was in the middle of it for 12 years, and now I'm in it in a different way in terms of the mineral exploration sector, how the heck are people around the world supposed to understand what's actually going on?
That's a good
point.
Like
that, and it's because it's not necessarily all bad. I could also make an argument that DRIPA, with the DRIPA legislation in place, the big companies, so like Newmont and Skeena, there will be others, I'm sure, that are actually moving big projects forward in terms of the final approvals required, through what are called Section 7 agreements, and these are Section 7 of the DRIPA legislation, which is about co-management and co-decision making. Right. And so there have been some positive announcements. The big companies that have lots of financial resources and lots of capacity, big teams of people, these companies can trade off different things for different things. They have a lot more flexibility, are figuring out how to adapt to certain provisions of the DRIPA legislation. And so there are still some big projects moving forward, and these are good projects. Right?
They are
Tall
good
10
projects,
they've signed these two co-management deals under Section 7 of DRIPA with the BC government, and in one case Skeena, and in another case Newmont, very recently. That these are big projects and they're good for the province and good for the country. But again, when you go back to the kind of the smaller projects and the exploration sector and the actual search for the minerals and all the regulatory requirements and the lack of capacity on the First Nations side, the complexity and the lack of clarity around what is actually required in terms of First Nations engagement and consultation versus consent. Yeah. There's a significant need for more clarity on that.
Well, it's great that you actually shed some clarity on it, because I think a lot of people, they hear the acronym, but they don't actually know what the legislation was intended to accomplish. When did you think that the conversation started to change?
Well, the conversation really started to change in 2021, and that was when Premier David Eby, who at the time was the Attorney General, he walked into the legislature. I was still an MLA at the time, and he introduced legislation to amend the Interpretation Act, which is separate from DRIPA, but is sort of the amendment that he brought forward is is tied directly to DRIPA. And the amendment in the Interpretation Act that David Eby made or brought forward, and the legislature, voted in favor. We voted against it in the opposition. So, but the NDP government had the majority numbers. Basically, it's a very simple amendment. But has had profound impacts, and it basically says that I'm slightly paraphrasing, but the general gist is every law and regulation of the province of British Columbia must be in alignment with the DRIPA legislation. So this is the piece that largely the judges in the Gitxaala case have kind of hung on to, and in other legal conversations, which has kind of brought in a whole other layer of kind of questions. Well, seriously, every single law in the province of British Columbia, so the province have to go back and start, bringing forward each law and regulation that's on the books. And what does that mean for certainty when you're trying to get stuff done?
Oh
and
my
approved?
gosh!
So I'm not saying it's necessarily all bad, but that to your question, the conversation around DRIPA evolving into something quite significantly more than what it was publicly stated to be when it was introduced in 2019.
That's right.
Do
Do you think that the conversation is getting confusing? I mean, you've touched on it a little bit. Do you think it got confusing because how it was implemented or how it was interpreted? Because those are two different conversations.
I think both. I think ultimately the implementation failure on the part of government is the biggest problem.
Okay.
So the solution to that is the government. It has to come from the government. The government needs more clear-eyed instruction and a framework for implementation to be understood within government and across ministries and across different departments of ministries. Because there's a consistency of application issue here that can often exist within the same department of the same ministry, just two different regions. You might get DRIPA implemented differently out of the Prince George office in the Ministry of Forests versus the Kamloops office, right? So there's that part of the implementation challenge. The government didn't have and still doesn't have what we believe the necessary capacity inherent to government to actually manage their way through all of the approvals and the things that are required. Likewise, we've been calling for more capacity funding from the province, and frankly, this is somewhere that the federal government could step up too. More capacity funding is needed for First Nations. A lot of the decision making, a lot of the referrals on these permits are going to First Nations that often are extremely remote, extremely small. They might be a nation of 250 or 300 members literally in one of the most remote locations of the province. And they don't have more than half a person or one person that's in-house that's able
the education
to process through this massive increase in volume of referrals, permit referrals. If you're Musqueam, if you're West Bank up in Kelowna, if you're to Kamloops or Ishiquetmik, where I'm from in Kamloops, or the Cowichan on Vancouver Island, these are really, really sophisticated, large. All First Nations are sophisticated in their own way, but I mean from a capacity perspective, right? Like they have the size and the scale and the capacity to, which would also imply the education and the training and the in-house capabilities to actually process this stuff at a more rapid clip. But if you're a 250, 300 person nation in the middle of a very remote part of the province, with very minimal access to infrastructure and whatnot, it becomes a pretty challenging piece. So the lack of sort of a roadmap internal to government, the lack of capacity inside of government, and the lack of capacity funding for First Nations, all of that is provincial government. Yeah, that's all up to the provincial government to fix. And those challenges haven't gone away. Like they're still there. Just the fact that the premier decided not to proceed with amendments to the DRIPA legislation like we were working with the province on.
Right.
And the ball's been kicked down the field to the October sitting of the legislature.
Whew, that's a long way.
Yeah, it's a long ways away. So we're still urging the government to bring forward amendments. We need to restore DRIPA back to its original intent. And so we we actually hired two of the smartest legal minds in this space in the country to actually draft the amendments, 4 amendments. And we worked very closely with the Premier's office on that because we were not and have not been calling for repeal of DRIPA. We've been saying, let's just fix the legislation because we're also equally, one eye on, well, if you repeal DRIPA, what comes in its place, right? It's 204 nations in the province. The very strong commitments were made to them around this legislation as a big important step in reconciliation. You can't just, pull that out on a Friday and then expect on Monday it's business as usual, everything's fine. Right? Like
There's an
expectation amongst First Nations that if not DRIPA, then what?
Yeah.
So our approach was, well, let's try to fix DRIPA and just take it back to its original intent. And so the amendments that we proposed were very simple, but they would bring it back to the original intent as per the undertakings of government in the legislature. That's all documented in Hansard. That was the promise, or the bargain that the government of British Columbia made with British Columbians and with First Nations and industry, frankly, for that matter, back in the day.
Well, you're boots on the ground with AME for sure. One of the big questions that comes up when I sit with people and we're talking about Indigenous communities, we're talking about all these things, where does consultation end and where does decision-making begin, specifically with DRIPA?
If anyone could provide a definitive answer to that,
that's where we're at.
That's where we're at. Like that exactly there is the challenge.
Okay, so there's no clear answer to that today.
No, and this is where, and some people in government, some First Nations, they bristle at the thought of what I'm about to say, but it's like, I mean, this is ultimately the role of the Supreme Court of Canada, right? There is Section 35 of the Constitution that guarantees, very specific rights to Indigenous peoples and First Nations and Inuit, across the country.
Rightfully
period,
so.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And over dozens and dozens of years, the Supreme Court has weighed in on different cases that has expanded the scope and scale of how Section 35 is to be interpreted in practice. And that's where we believe ultimately, if you fix DRIPA, restore DRIPA to its original intent, so it's more of a guiding set of principles and so forth. It's not about, a veto or consent being mandatory. It's certainly about engagement, consultation, partnership, equity, all that stuff. And you bolster efforts, other tools that governments have, like the treaty process and the obviously Section 35. Court decisions take a long time, but that's the whole point. Like the stuff doesn't happen overnight, and it should be. The steps are done in increments, right? You bring the public and everyone along at the same pace. So we'll see where this goes, but where does consultation begin and end, and decision making begin and end? It really depends on who you talk to, and certainly with respect to Section 7 of the DRIPA legislation, when you're talking about co-management and co-decision making, I mean, there's several deals now that have been signed with big mining companies in the province of British Columbia and the Tahltan that, as I said earlier in our episode here, are really good projects for British Columbia. There's no question about it. The participants in that process would have an idea in their minds what where consent begins and ends, and where consultation begins and ends.
So it's basically based on your own experience.
Well, and I think I'll come back to what my day job is like as the CEO of the Association for Mineral Exploration, with a particular focus on prospectors and the junior mining company, sort of that early explorations segment. We want maximum certainty and clarity around who's responsible for what, who has to do what, so that we can move. Everybody can move forward with more confidence. We have amazing geology in this province. We've got incredible talent and expertise in our skilled workforce. We've got really good infrastructure. We have a federal and provincial government now, and it's very, very current. Like as of the taping of this episode, I mean, a huge announcement today about a partnership between the two levels of government investing in billions of dollars of infrastructure, ports, Northwest Transmission Line, direct investments in some of the mining projects themselves. This is all really good stuff. That's putting kind of your money where your mouth is in terms of Canada and British Columbia becoming that minerals, the critical mineral superpower. But we can't forget about exploration and all of that heavy lifting going back 30 years when I was up at the Sulphurets Glacier. A lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of permits and a lot of regulatory, things you have to do. We've got to expedite and streamline that and make sure that the rules are clear and make sure that decisions can get made in a timely fashion. And that's the piece that, we think that DRIPA is playing, unfortunately, a role in kind of slowing some things down in that piece.
Yeah.
And if we don't deal with it now, we're going to see these big projects that are being announced, every other week now, which is good. These are all large, well-advanced projects. They're fantastic. Once you get through kind of a wave of announcements for those projects over the next year, 2 years, our concern is, there's a bit of a gap, between sort of this current wave and the next wave. And the next wave is smaller, right? Because we've held back through regulatory processes and like delays and long permitting timelines and the impact of DRIPA being kind of driven so deep down into and applied, without, being applied in different ways in different places at different times. And so because there's not a really good roadmap, all the stuff that we've talked about is just kind of holding back that next big wave that we want to see roll through the province in the next, say 10 years from now. Right.
Yeah. Well, Ontario passed the Bill 5, and that's really pushing through the permitting and the regulatory processes properly. And they have, amended, we'll say, 10 different areas in the current state that they're in. And that's supposed to help Ontario. And I know that Canada is probably watching that on a larger scale. Not even days or weeks later, Ottawa then passed Bill C5. And that's doing sort of answering the same question and pushing the same things through, but on a national level now.
Right.
Is DRIPA included in those things when, if that comes this way and we start doing the same bill, especially the C5 on the Ottawa side, DRIPA is still a part of that though, is it not?
Well, I mean, DRIPA is, there's only 2 jurisdictions in the entire world that have DRIPA-like legislation on the books.
BC,
British Columbia, and Canada.
Okay.
Canada does not have several of the more challenging, the provisions that are more challenging in the BC context. Canada doesn't have those in the federal, the Canadian legislation. So it's a little less challenging. But if you're in Ontario or you're in Saskatchewan or New Brunswick, you don't have you don't have this DRIPA reality, and so. This is also within the context of our country, right? From a competitiveness perspective and a level playing field, and in all of the provincial efforts to reach out and attract foreign investment to their jurisdiction. The First Nations reality that we have in British Columbia should be a huge positive, and it is in many cases. As I said at the very, very outset of our conversation, our members have got great relationships with First Nations and have for decades. But with the DRIPA overlay, there is no doubt that there's, it's casting a little bit of a shadow, a little bit of uncertainty.
So do you think that there can be strong reconciliation and strong investment climate at this time, right now, the way things are working?
I do. I mean, we're notwithstanding all the challenges that we've just talked about, the headwinds. We're still seeing very significant inflows of investment into British Columbia in different, projects that tend to be the larger, more advanced projects.
Right.
We'd still like to see more of an uptick in investment related to the smaller or more early stage exploration projects, or smaller, early stage, mining companies. Some of that's attributable to what we've been talking about with the the uncertainty around DRIPA and so forth. But no, absolutely. I think that there's 100%. There's a reality that that currently exists, and I think it could become even better, where reconciliation actually, it should be a net positive for us in terms of attracting investment, having our First Nations, as stewards of the land and sustainability, and
Right.
the history that goes back millennia with First Nations. Of course, that should be a competitive advantage for us, and it is in some projects. But I think fundamentally, it's incumbent upon the province of British Columbia, the current government, to once and for all, they have to deal with the DRIPA legislation.
They do.
Right? The premier said it until he backed away from it. Right?
Stop delaying.
That legislation needs to be fixed, and the balance needs to be restored, and it needs to be taken back to its original promise. If we do that, it's not going to make everybody happy, but it's going to take it back to what it was supposed to be, what it was promised to be, and it's going to provide much greater level of certainty.
Well, I mean,
moving forward in our opinion.
Not just Canada, but the world is really watching how BC is going to navigate through this. And I said it in our last conversation as well. There's a lot of investors are like, it's so volatile right now. There's so much uncertainty right now. I don't know if that's where I want to put my dollars. And that's going to not just affect the mining industry, it's going to affect the economy altogether. So this really absolutely needs to be dealt with. What message right now do you think BC is sending the world?
I think overall the province has, as I said earlier, I think their intentions at the highest level are sound. I think that we continue to have one of the most robust environments for financial incentives, tax credit and the flow-through share programs and tax credit programs, and there's a very attractive environment to make investment from that perspective. We have outstanding infrastructure. We have amazing talent, as I said earlier. We export a massive amount of mining and mineral exploration services to the rest of the world. Why? Because we do it better than anyone else in the world.
Right.
And we do have a growing number of incredibly positive relationships that we can point to between industry and First Nations in different parts of the province. That all being said, the one piece that that the world is, it does notice and they're paying attention to is, at the end of the day, who makes the final decision? Who's the final authority?
Who influences? Who's the authority?
Yeah. Is it the province of British Columbia? Is it First Nations? Is it both? Is it, and that there is clarity required on that piece, and or greater clarity than exists at the moment. And I think if we could establish that greater clarity, we would see an even more significant jump in the investment levels that are coming into British Columbia.
Are those the questions that your members are wanting answers to first, or what are some other questions your members are going, this is what I need answers to, this is more important than this, and what is it?
Well, I think the members aren't necessarily fixated on the DRIPA legislation. They're fixated on the kind of the implications of it, and so as we talked about earlier, it's like one of the implications of how DRIPA has evolved, into a space where it was never intended is just how deep down into the regulatory processes the statutory decision makers have interpreted the requirement for consent. So the most basic of permit that should be a no-brainer and will always get approved because it is such a no-brainer, that used to take a minute, or 15 minutes, to approve, should not take months.
Wow.
Right? And yet it does, because that statutory decision maker in that department of that ministry, without any guidance to the contrary, is requiring, that particular, permit to be put over here to these. In some cases, it can be 3. Sometimes it's 5 different First Nations, for their consultation and engagement. And it's just it was never intended to, the legislation was never intended for that to happen.
So October is the next time for the discussion to come up.
Yeah, I mean, we're urging the premier to follow through on a number of his commitments. Like, he did say he was going to fix this legislation, and we drafted it all for them. Like, we did all that work with the premier's office, so those amendments are ready to go. Secondly, he did say that he was going to take this summer, when he announced postponing the amendments in the last session. He said that he was going to take the time over the summer to sit down with First Nations leadership, but also with industry leadership, and figure out what that path forward looks like. Well, we haven't heard from the province yet about what the industry engagement piece looks like.
Yeah.
But I remind the premier that he committed to doing that, to making sure that there is a good, meaningful sort of engagement with the public and with industry about what the path forward needs to look like. I'm hoping that the combination of the premier following through on that commitment, as well as the feedback that he gets from First Nations leadership, obviously, that is kind of merged together and brought forward in some form or another in the October legislative session, reflected in amendments to the legislation. Like, the status quo, doing nothing, is not the answer.
One of the things that came up with a few people that I spoke with about DRIPA, or when DRIPA comes up, is people use it when it's beneficial for them, and then they fight it when it's not beneficial for them. Are you hearing the same things?
Not so much than that. I wouldn't describe it that way. I keep coming back to, there's just a lack of understanding and a lack of confidence, a lack of equal application of it, right? Just a lack of implementation support. Like, how is this supposed to be implemented? It's not consistent. It's not clear. Not just within government broadly, but like I said earlier, within departments of the same ministry, can often have different, depending on who you talk to. You might get two very different, results, because it's just not consistent, and that's not conducive to investment in investor confidence and whatnot, right? No. So there is lots of investment coming to British Columbia. The world has not given up on British Columbia. It's not too late. Yeah. I think. Well, I'll end on this note. Maybe, like, we saw a significant rise in overall exploration dollars spent in 2025 here in BC, $751 million, I believe. So that's good news. That's the top line number. But what really got my attention is that we actually, in that survey, for the first time in a long time, British Columbia fell into fourth place for total dollar spent. So we fell below Saskatchewan. Now, nothing against Saskatchewan. I have lots of family from Saskatchewan. I love Saskatchewan.
Nothing against you, Saskatchewan.
We love Saskatchewan, but there is no universe in which British Columbia, with the the abundance of mineralization and what we have here in British Columbia, should be, in fourth place behind Saskatchewan in total investment in the mineral exploration sector. So what that tells me is that, sure, our overall investment went up. That's good. Like, in British Columbia, the number went up year over year. Yeah, that's good. Just imagine if we could clear some of this other stuff, provide the certainty required and just kind of expedite things and make things move faster. What would that 751 actually be?
Mm-hmm. And that's where we're going to leave it right there. I think that's a great place to leave it right there. Thank you so much for being here. I think it really does give so much more clarity on where we're at, where it started, and hopefully where that's going, and the fight that you have behind it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to talk this through with you.
I'm sure you'll be back.
All right. I just need an invitation.
Sounds good. The truth is this conversation was never really about mining. It was never about permits or projects or legislation even. It's about whether BC can become the example the rest of Canada wants to follow, or the cautionary tale they're determined to avoid. Because while we continue debating DRIPA, the rest of the country is watching. Governments are watching. Indigenous communities are definitely watching. Investors are watching. They're all asking the same question. Has BC found a way to balance reconciliation with economic opportunity, or are we still trying to define where that balance actually exists? So I'm going to leave you with this. Years from now, when people look back on this moment, will they say DRIPA became the foundation for a stronger, more collaborative future, or will they say it became the moment BC lost its competitive edge? That's not a question for Todd. That's not even a question for government. That's a question every British Columbian should be asking. Let us know where you stand in the comments below. Now remember, these are the opinions of our own with possible vested interest in any or all of the companies we may have spoken about. This is not to be used as financial advice. Always be sure to speak with a licensed financial advisor and know your own risk tolerances. For a copy of our complete disclaimer, head over to apiton.com. I'm Lyndsay Malchuk, and I'll see you next time right here on the Markets and Leaders podcast.